Conway Twitty and Loretta Lynn maintained for decades that their relationship was merely friendship. But there was more going on behind the lights, the stage, and the studio walls. Something neither of them was willing to say out loud. Fans had been speculating for a while. Reporters were proud. Both celebrities remained silent until the very end, despite inquiries from family members, because Conway Twitty finally acknowledged the significance of Loretta Lynn to him before his death. And his admission challenges all of our preconceived notions about the most famous country music duet in history. It was intended to be a one-time recording. When Loretta Lynn and Conway Twitty initially collaborated in 1971, they won a Grammy and reached the top of the country charts with their song, After the Fire Is Gone. But the music wasn't the only thing that struck a chord. It was the link. Their chemistry was amazing on stage. It was more difficult to ignore off stage. They had no trouble laughing. They made frequent contact. Like two parts of the same thought, they completed each other's statements. Audiences sensed it. It was more than just a show. There was something genuine going on between them. Nevertheless, they were both married. They both have families. And for years, none of them would accept anything other than friendship. Fans weren't buying it, though. Loretta and Conway's relationship sparked curiosity in the traditional country music industry, where family values were paramount. They were pursued from city to city by rumors. During their tours, several whispered of weekends that were taken. Others said their husbands had felt uncomfortable with the intimacy between them. However, despite the rumors, Loretta and Conway stayed silent and together in public. They appeared to have a profound understanding of one another, which added to the fascination of their interaction. Loretta had been raised in Butcher Hollow, Kentucky, in poverty. With just talent and perseverance, she battled her way into a male-dominated field, got married early, and raised 6 children. Conway's arc was comparable. Harold Jenkins was born. With each step, he reinvented himself as he clawed his way from rock and roll anonymity to country music aristocracy. They were more than simply co-stars. They had survived. And few people were able to see what they saw in one another. It was more than admiration, though. Conway was once described by Loretta as the only man she could really rely on in her life. When asked why they got along so well, Conway simply replied, "We just get each other." Those casual remarks were significant. For two individuals who had witnessed, accomplished, and constructed so much, their silence frequently carried greater significance than their words. Their connection deepened behind the scenes. During her worst times, such as when her husband Doolittle was on the verge of dying, and when her children passed away, Loretta turned to Conway. When Conway's personal life became complicated, his health began to deteriorate, and the pressures of celebrity became too much to handle, he also turned to Loretta. Their relationship turned into a secret, precious thing. However, that privacy eventually turned into a mystery of its own. After all those years, people questioned why they never recorded a last duet, why they never formally announced their relationship, and why they never ever acknowledged that there was more. And the rumors became more loud as a result of that quiet. Later on, there were hints from Loretta's kids that they had an unsaid relationship. According to Conway's daughter, her father would glow differently around Loretta than he would around other people. Conway also made a secret admission, shortly before his death in 1993, that would remain unspoken for years. Conway Twitty was becoming weary by the early 1990s, not of the music, but of the burden it carried. He was exhausted from decades of touring, recording, and silently carrying his own burdens. The shift was noticed by friends. He appeared more thoughtful and aloof. He had a feeling that his time was running short, but he never spoke it out loud, and he wished to make amends before it happened. He began contacting those who had been most important in his life. Loretta was the name that kept coming up. It had been years since they had recorded together. As new country performers emerged in the 1980s, their duet collaboration lost its prominence. Her absence, however, had not weakened the connection for Conway. Actually, it had merely clarified things. He began talking about her in a different way as he slowed down in private, with people he trusted, rather than in public. Among them was Kathy, his daughter. Conway revealed more about Loretta than he had ever done before, at a moment that would remain with her forever. He spoke softly, but without hesitation. He claimed that he had dedicated his life to becoming the kind of man that society wanted him to be, charming, resilient, and unflappable. He didn't have to try with Loretta, though. Despite everything, she still accepted him. Kathy never forgot what he said next. "I never got to keep the affection I had for her." It was a statement full of restraint and affection. It was a reality he had kept to himself for 30 years, not a scandal or a regret. He never claimed treachery or stated that they were lovers, but he acknowledged then that the one person he had always loved from a distance was Loretta. She had a spouse. He showed respect. Both of them were celebrities attempting to make it in a field that preyed on the weak. Thus, he never went too far. Nevertheless, the affection remained constant. Their songs had been woven with such love. Every look on stage and every pause between lines had shown it. It had been spotted by fans. It had been mentioned by critics, but no one ever had evidence. Kathy hadn't mentioned it for years until that point. Like a parting communication between father and daughter, she kept it hidden. She didn't disclose it until a long time after his passing. Fans weren't surprised when she did. They were devastated since it supported the long-held beliefs of many. A sort of love that never ended existed between Loretta and Conway. They had remained silent out of respect for their followers, their families, and the promises they had made to others. However, the truth had always there, lurking in the background of each duet they had ever performed, even when they were silent. However, one question remained. What had Loretta felt all those years ago? If Conway had finally named what she meant to him before he passed away, why had she never responded? Why, once he was gone, had she remained silent? The response would appear in the method, rather than in an interview or headline. After Conway passed away, Loretta modified both what she said and, more significantly, what she didn't say about him. Because often the emotions we keep to ourselves are the most profound. In her own way, Loretta Lynn was also grieving. Conway Twitty's unexpected death from an abdominal aneurysm was announced in June 1993. There was no press conference given by Loretta Lynn. She didn't compose a public ode. For a while, she didn't even perform. Rather, she vanished. She was saddened, according to those closest to her, in a level they hadn't witnessed since the death of her children. But it was more than simply grief this time. There was quiet. And that stillness said it all for someone who had always been vocal, and always eager to face heartbreak head-on. She canceled her appearances. She declined to be interviewed. Additionally, her voice was different, quieter, and more distant when she did talk. It seemed as though she had lost something essential. She was more than just Conway's duet partner. She was a part of her when he was around. Fans waited for her to open out. Years passed while they waited. But the moment they hoped for was never given by her. She never acknowledged the rumors, never claimed to have loved him, and never provided the desired quote to the media. She told stories instead, little easy tales. He used to make her laugh so hard that she was unable to sing. When she felt freezing backstage, he once gave her a coat. When label officials questioned her writing, he defended her. They weren't big admissions. They were shards scattered parts of a shared history too sacred to articulate. Years after Conway's passing, a television special featured one of the most poignant moments. They asked Loretta what her favorite performance with him was. Her eyes swelled, yet she smiled. Because she wasn't simply talking about music, her simple statement held more weight than any headline. I don't have just one. Every time we sang together, it felt like home. She hesitated before continuing, and I don't think I'll ever feel that again. She was talking about belonging, about a connection so profound, so uncommon it couldn't be duplicated. Not in a studio, not on a stage, not even in memory. According to friends, Loretta kept an unposed picture of Conway at her house, rather than an official press still. He was smiling mid-laugh, wearing a denim jacket. It was there, framed, conspicuous, unaltered, yet she never mentioned it or brought it up. In the years that followed, she never forgot to mention him, when she was inducted into several halls of fame. Each time, she expressed gratitude to Conway, her mentors, her family, and her fans. It was presence, not just allegiance. He was by her side even in death. Some questioned whether she regretted any unsaid words, missed opportunities, or overly rigid boundaries. If she did, though, she never showed it. Because fantasy was not Loretta Lynn's specialty. She was formed in suffering. She was a real person. And this was the actual reality. Everything that she and Conway owned belonged to them, and it was never defined by anyone else. One of her casual remarks was, "Conway knew me better than most." It was a brief but profound statement. Because Loretta decided to preserve the silence in this one instance, despite having dedicated her life to shattering barriers, overcoming heartbreak, and using song to speak the truth. Perhaps because it was love, not because it wasn't. Fans held on to the hope that Loretta Lynn would eventually sit down and share her true feelings for Conway Twitty as the years went by. Not in passing, not in a song, but completely, honestly, and definitively. That time never arrived. Perhaps that was the purpose. Because scandal wasn't mentioned when folks talked about Conway and Loretta. They discussed their need, his gaze on her from the other side of the microphone stand, and the gentle grin she would give him when a duet's final note faded. Fans' memories weren't filled with passion. Something more profound, something incomplete. That similar emotional weight was frequently present in their songs. Songs like After the Fire Is Gone and Lead Me On weren't just about made-up loves. They seemed intimate, as though they were narrating their own tale in a language that only they could comprehend. Together, they recorded 11 albums, took home numerous accolades, and captivated audiences with their music and concept. The relationship that didn't require explanation. Perhaps that was sufficient for Conway and Loretta. Maybe naming it would have broken it. Perhaps making it public would have stolen the one thing that had been theirs exclusively. But there is a price for silence. Loretta lost more than just a duet partner when Conway passed away. The one person who had supported her across decades of change, suffering, and celebrity passed away. Someone who has never held her accountable for her errors. Someone who asked her to be herself and no one else. And for years, Conway sat next to her in green rooms, dressing rooms, and buses always close, but never too close. He once claimed that being on stage with them was when he felt most like himself. It was where the weight lifted, where they didn't have to pretend. However, they parted ways as soon as the song ended. Back to their spouses, their children, their own anguish. There were times when everything could have been different. Even though there were moments when they were both in pain, their marriages were failing. And life would have let it, neither of them went over that line. Was it fear, loyalty, or the knowledge that the concept of them might be more potent than the actual one? Later in life, Loretta would speak about Conway. She didn't say it frequently, but when she did, her voice was always gentle. She never called him a soulmate or a companion. She didn't have to, though. It was all in her face. The feeling was just beneath the surface. A type of pain you bear when you have a profound affection for someone, but have never completely expressed it aloud. Perhaps this is the reason their story endures. Why, after all these years, people are still drawn to it. Because everyone has at least one person who could have been, who remained just out of reach. The moment was never right. Not because the love wasn't there. There was more than emptiness in the silence between Conway and Loretta. It was holy. Perhaps that's why the mystery still feels more personal than any confession ever could. They didn't have to express it. It was already sung by them. In the final chapter of Loretta Lynn's life, fans began to detect something lacking from her concerts. She continued to perform her hits. Though there were less Conway songs and references to the man who had been her other half in music, she continued to share her story. It wasn't resentment. Avoidance wasn't the issue. The recollections seemed too brittle to be repeatedly viewed, more like preservation. Conway, after all, had never been merely Loretta's duet partner. The only man in Nashville who had never treated her as like she didn't belong was him. From the start, he viewed her as an equal. He never questioned her writing, accent, or ambition when others did. He was not a rival to her. He was by her side the entire time. And something in her music changed after his death. If you listen carefully, you'll hear that the spark in her duets with other people never completely came back. There was still a rhythm. The old warmth and tacit ease had vanished, but the lyrics remained incisive. She put out albums. Despite winning accolades, she never collaborated on a song as well as she did with Conway. Because trust was just as important as talent. I Can't Hear the Music is a tribute song that Loretta recorded when Conway passed away. The loss of someone whose presence was louder than any audience is the subject of this melancholy and painful essay. It didn't top the charts. Even though it wasn't widely advertised, it expressed what she couldn't. It was a farewell, and the closest she ever got to acknowledging how much he had meant to her. Like so many of the songs they had sung together, that one sounds different now. Because of the confession Conway made in his last days, fans hear it in a different light. Once poetic, the lines now seem to be a coded goodbye. A secret agreement between two individuals who never had to explain anything. And many are still haunted by that. The fact that these two legendary singers, who had sang so candidly about heartbreak, desire, and passion, had decided to keep their innermost emotions hidden. Perhaps, though, that is why their narrative is important. Because love isn't always loud, as it reminds us. It isn't usually photographed or announced with sweeping movements. It can occasionally be found in self-control, deference, and the decision to avoid crossing a line that will never be crossed. Additionally, incomplete love stories can often be the best. That final song Conway Twitty sang with Loretta Lynn was never performed. As they harmonized on stage, he never had the opportunity to stand next to her one last time and gaze into her eyes. However, he left a more enduring legacy, a gently revealed truth near the end of his life that provided supporters with the long-awaited resolution. "I never got to keep the affection I had for her." Loretta lived those words in every pause, every glance, and every note of every song they ever sang together. Even if she never spoke them, they didn't need a public commitment or a chapter title for their love story. It had already been composed. Few collaborations in country music history have ever been as close as the one between Conway Twitty and Loretta Lynn. They sounded as if they were meant to be together. There was no denying their chemistry. Nevertheless, the stillness, the things they didn't say, the boundaries they didn't breach, and the truth they both carried to the very end were the most potent aspects of their tale. It was not scandalized by Conway's last admission, humanized. Fans were reminded that two people negotiating the complexities of fame, loyalty, and timing were behind the glistening stage lights and platinum records. Individuals who discovered something unique in one another, even though they were never given the opportunity to fully claim it. Loretta never revealed anything shocking to us. She was not required to. She let the music do the talking. And to those who paid attention, it conveyed more information than any headline could. Even if they didn't have the happy ending they had hoped for, what they had and held dear was possibly more durable. Because certain love stories reverberate after the curtain has fallen. See here for more heartfelt tales.